The Serpent in the Silk. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Rose Garden. Anya smoothed the crisp linen of the king's bed, her movements practiced and efficient. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows of the royal chambers, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Anya loved these quiet moments, the calm before the day truly began within the bustling castle. She'd been a maid in the king's service for 5 years, rising from a lowly scullery maid to a respected member of the royal household. She took pride in her work, in the small role she played in keeping the kingdom running smoothly. King Theron was a just and well-loved ruler, known for his wisdom and compassion. Anya, like many in the kingdom, held him in high regard. Queen Isolde, on the other hand, was a more enigmatic figure. Beautiful and regal, she possessed a sharp intellect and a cool demeanor that often left Anya feeling uneasy. The queen kept largely to her own wing of the castle, immersed in studies and council meetings. Anya finished her duties in the king's bedchamber and moved into the queen's antechamber. The atmosphere here was noticeably different, colder, and more formal. The furniture was ornate, crafted from dark wood and upholstered in deep, somber colors. It felt more like a place of business than a space of rest. As Anya dusted a delicate porcelain vase, she heard the rustle of silk from within the queen's private chambers. She froze, expecting the queen to emerge. Instead, she heard voices, hushed and urgent. "The apothecary assures me it's untraceable," a voice said, a voice Anya instantly recognized as belonging to Queen Isolde. "And the dosage?" another voice replied, this one unfamiliar, deeper and raspy. It sent a shiver down Anya's spine. Small at first, to weaken him, to make him seem ill. Then, a larger dose to finish the task. The queen's voice was devoid of emotion, chillingly clinical. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs. Poison? The queen was speaking of poison. Was she planning to? She strained to hear more, but the voices had lowered to a near whisper. Anya carefully placed the vase back on the table, her hands trembling slightly. She knew she should leave, pretend she heard nothing, but a sense of dread, a deep-seated loyalty to the king, held her rooted to the spot. She heard the shuffle of fabric again, and the queen's voice, now clearer, said, "See that the wine is delivered as I instructed, and ensure no one suspects your involvement. Your life depends on it." "Of course, your majesty," the raspy voice replied. "My discretion is assured." Anya knew she had to get out. She straightened, smoothed her apron, and turned towards the door, hoping to appear as if she had just arrived. As she reached for the handle, the door swung open, and a man emerged. He was tall and gaunt, with piercing eyes that seemed to bore right through her. His face was etched with lines that spoke of hardship and secrets. He wore the livery of a royal servant, but his bearing was far from subservient. He stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowing as they met Anya's. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "You are?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. Anya swallowed hard, trying to appear calm. "Anya, your sir, a maid in service to the king and queen." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze lingering on her face. "See that you attend to your duties diligently, Anya," he said finally, his voice a low growl. "And that you hear nothing, you understand?" Anya nodded, her throat tight with fear. "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." He stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Anya hurried out of the antechamber, her mind reeling. She had stumbled upon a conspiracy, a plot to murder the king. She had to do something, but what? Who would believe her, a simple maid, against the queen? And how could she possibly expose the plot without endangering her own life? The man's warning hung heavy in the air, a silent threat that followed her as she fled down the corridor. Chapter 2. The Weight of Silence. Anya spent the rest of the morning in a daze, performing her duties mechanically. She cleaned and polished, swept and dusted, but her mind was elsewhere, trapped in the chilling conversation she had overheard. The queen, planning to poison the king. The thought was almost too monstrous to comprehend. She considered confiding in someone, but who could she trust? The royal household was a web of alliances and rivalries, where loyalties shifted like the desert sands. Telling the wrong person could be a death sentence, not just for her, but for the king as well. She thought of the king's chamberlain, Lord Marius. He was a stern but fair man, known for his unwavering loyalty to the crown, but even he was a close confidant of the queen, often seen at her side during council meetings. Could she trust him? The risk was too great. She briefly considered going directly to the king, but dismissed the idea almost immediately. Without proof, her accusations would sound like the ravings of a hysterical maid, and if the queen discovered she had betrayed her, the consequences would be swift and brutal. Anya's heart ached with the weight of her secret. She felt trapped, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. She longed to share her burden, but she knew she had to tread carefully, to gather evidence before taking any action. During the midday meal, she observed the queen closely. Isolde sat at the head of the table, regal and composed, engaging in polite conversation with the courtiers. She showed no sign of guilt or remorse, no indication of the dark plan she had concocted. She looked every bit the devoted wife, concerned for the well-being of her husband. The king, seated to her right, seemed oblivious to the danger he was in. He smiled and laughed, his eyes twinkling with warmth. Anya's stomach churned. How could the queen be so callous, so cold-blooded? How could she betray the man who had trusted her, loved her, and made her his queen? As the meal progressed, Anya noticed that the queen was particularly attentive to the king, ensuring his goblet was always full, personally selecting delicacies from the serving platters and placing them on his plate. It was a performance, a carefully orchestrated charade designed to mask her true intentions. Anya watched as a servant, a young man with nervous eyes, approached the king with a pitcher of wine. It was the same man she had seen leaving the queen's chambers that morning, the man who had warned her to hear nothing. He poured the king a generous measure of wine, his hand trembling slightly. Anya's blood ran cold. This was it. This was the moment the poison would be administered. She had to do something, anything to stop it. But what could she do? She was just a maid, unnoticed and insignificant. If she spoke out, she would be dismissed as a liar, a madwoman, and the king would still drink the poisoned wine. A wave of despair washed over her. She felt helpless, powerless to prevent the impending tragedy. She watched, frozen in place, as the king raised the goblet to his lips. Just as he was about to drink, a loud crash echoed through the hall. A serving tray had been dropped, sending dishes and cutlery clattering to the floor. Everyone turned to look, their attention diverted from the king. Anya seized the opportunity. She rushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Your Majesty," she cried, her voice trembling with urgency. "Please, don't drink that wine." All eyes turned to her. The king lowered the goblet, his brow furrowed in confusion. The serving man stood frozen, his eyes wide with panic. "What is the meaning of this outburst?" the queen demanded, her voice dripping with ice. Anya knew she had to choose her words carefully. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I saw a rat near the wine pitcher. I fear the wine may be tainted." It was a flimsy excuse, but it was the best she could come up with on the spur of the moment. The queen's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing. She didn't believe Anya for a second. "Ridiculous," the queen said, her voice sharp and dismissive. "There are no rats in the royal dining hall. You are mistaken." "But, Your Majesty," Anya persisted, her voice pleading. "I saw it with my own eyes. Please, just to be safe, have the wine tested." The king, who had been watching the exchange with growing concern, finally spoke. "Isolde, perhaps the maid is right. It would be wise to err on the side of caution." The queen hesitated, her face a study in barely suppressed rage. She knew she was losing control of the situation. "Very well," she said finally, her voice tight. "Have the wine tested." She glared at Anya, her eyes promising retribution. "And you," she said, her voice dripping with venom, "you will be punished for this disruption." Chapter 3: Shadows of Suspicion. The wine was tested by the royal physician, a nervous, bespectacled man who wrung his hands as he conducted the examination. Anya watched anxiously, her heart pounding in her chest. If the poison was as untraceable as the queen claimed, the test would reveal nothing, and she would be branded a liar and a troublemaker. The physician worked quickly, using a series of vials and instruments to analyze the wine. After what seemed like an eternity, he looked up, his face pale. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice trembling, I have detected a trace of belladonna in the wine." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, was a potent poison that could cause paralysis and death. The king's face darkened with anger. "Belladonna?" he roared. "In my wine? How is this possible?" The queen's face was a mask of shock and disbelief. I have no idea," she stammered, her voice trembling. This is outrageous. Someone is trying to sabotage me, to make me look like I—" She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. The king turned to the serving man, the one Anya had seen leaving the queen's chambers. "You, where did you get this wine?" The man's face was ashen. He stammered and stuttered, unable to form a coherent sentence. I, from the royal cellars, Your Majesty." "As always," the king demanded, his voice thundering. "And did you tamper with it in any way?" The man shook his head frantically, his eyes darting nervously from the king to the queen. "No, Your Majesty, I swear I would never." The king didn't wait for him to finish. He signaled to the guards. "Seize him," he commanded, "and take him to the dungeons for interrogation. I want to know who is behind this treasonous plot." The guards seized the man, dragging him away, kicking and screaming. The queen watched in silence, her face pale and drawn. The king turned to Anya, his expression softening. "You have my gratitude, child," he said, his voice sincere. "You may have saved my life. What is your name?" "Anya, Your Majesty," she replied, curtsying deeply. "I am a maid in your service." "Anya," the king repeated, his eyes twinkling. "You have shown great courage and loyalty. You will be rewarded." He dismissed the rest of the court, ordering them to return to their duties. He then turned to the queen, his face hardening. "Isolde," he said, his voice cold, "I want answers. I want to know how belladonna found its way into my wine." The queen's eyes filled with tears. "Theron, I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this," she pleaded. "I am as shocked and horrified as you are. Someone is trying to frame me, to destroy our marriage." The king looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I hope you are telling me the truth, Isolde," he said finally, "for if I discover that you are involved in this plot, there will be consequences." He turned and walked away, leaving the queen standing alone in the hall, her face a mask of despair. Anya was dismissed from her duties for the day, but she knew she was far from safe. She had exposed the plot, but she had also made a powerful enemy in the queen. She knew that Isolde would not rest until she had silenced her, one way or another. As she walked back to her small chamber in the servants' quarters, she felt a pair of eyes watching her. She turned to see the queen's personal guard, a hulking man with a scarred face, standing in the shadows. He didn't speak, but his gaze was enough to send a chill down her spine. Anya knew she had to be careful. She had to protect herself, and she had to continue to investigate the plot. She couldn't rely on the king or his guards. She was on her own. She reached her chamber, a small, sparsely furnished room that offered little comfort. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She was trapped in a dangerous game and she had no idea how to win. But she knew one thing. She would not give up. She would not let the queen poison the king and seize the throne. She would fight for what was right, even if it meant risking her own life. Chapter 4. The Dungeon's Secret. Anya spent the evening in her chamber, trying to formulate a plan. She knew she needed more information, more proof of the queen's involvement. But how could she get it? She had no access to the queen's private chambers, no way of eavesdropping on their conversations. She considered trying to speak to the serving man who had been arrested, but she knew that was impossible. The dungeons were heavily guarded, and she would never be allowed to see him. Then an idea struck her. She knew the castle well, having worked in nearly every corner of it over the past 5 years. She knew the secret passages, the hidden doors, the forgotten tunnels that snaked beneath the castle walls. She remembered hearing whispers of a secret passage that led to the dungeons, a passage used by the guards to transport prisoners discreetly. If she could find that passage, she might be able to overhear the interrogation, to learn more about the queen's plot. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one she could think of. She waited until nightfall, when the castle was quiet, and the guards were less vigilant. Then, she slipped out of her chamber, and made her way to the oldest part of the castle, where the secret passage was rumored to be located. The passage was hidden behind a tapestry, in a rarely used storage room. Anya had to feel around for several minutes before she found the hidden latch that released the tapestry, revealing a narrow, dark opening in the wall. She hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding. She knew that entering the passage was a dangerous gamble. If she was caught, she would be accused of treason and thrown into the dungeons herself. But she couldn't turn back now. She had come too far. She took a deep breath and stepped into the passage. The passage was narrow and claustrophobic, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. She groped her way forward, her hands brushing against the cold, damp stone walls. After what seemed like an eternity, she reached a small opening in the wall, a peephole that looked directly into the dungeon's interrogation chamber. She pressed her eye to the peephole and peered inside. The interrogation chamber was a grim, windowless room, lit by a single flickering torch. The serving man, his face bruised and swollen, was strapped to a wooden chair. 2 guards stood over him, their faces hard and unforgiving. The king's chamberlain, Lord Marius, was also present, standing to the side, his arms folded across his chest. He watched the interrogation with a detached, almost clinical interest. "Tell us who gave you the belladonna," Lord Marius said, his voice cold and menacing. "Tell us who ordered you to poison the king." The serving man shook his head, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "I didn't poison the king, I swear." Lord Marius sighed, his expression impatient. "Don't play coy with me," he said. "We know you're lying. We have evidence that you were seen leaving the queen's chambers on the morning of the incident." The serving man's eyes widened in panic. I was just delivering a message," he said. "That's all. I didn't know anything about poison." "A message?" Lord Marius repeated, his voice skeptical. "What message?" The serving man hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting nervously around the room. I can't say," he stammered. "I was sworn to secrecy." Lord Marius smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a shiver down Anya's spine. "Sworn to secrecy, eh?" he said. "Well, we have ways of loosening tongues in this place. Tell us the message, and we'll make things easy for you. Refuse, and things will get unpleasant." He gestured to the guards, who stepped forward, their faces grim. One of them held a red-hot iron in his hand. Anya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She couldn't watch this. It was too barbaric, too cruel. But she knew she couldn't leave. She had to stay and listen. She had to find out who was behind the plot. The guards pressed the hot iron against the serving man's skin. He screamed in agony, his body convulsing in pain. "Tell us," Lord Marius demanded, his voice relentless. "Who gave you the message?" The serving man sobbed and pleaded, but he refused to speak. The guards continued to torture him, their faces impassive. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the serving man broke. He screamed out a name that made Anya's blood run cold. "Lord Valerius," he cried. "Lord Valerius gave me the message." Chapter 5: The Chamberlain's Game. Anya recoiled from the peephole, her mind reeling. Lord Valerius. He was one of the king's most trusted advisors, a man known for his integrity and loyalty. Could he really be involved in a plot to poison the king? It seemed impossible, but Anya knew she couldn't dismiss it. She had to investigate, to find out the truth. She listened as the interrogation continued, Lord Marius pressing the serving man for more details about Lord Valerius's involvement. The serving man revealed that Lord Valerius had been secretly meeting with the queen, exchanging coded messages and whispered instructions. He had been the one who had provided the belladonna, instructing the serving man to add it to the king's wine. The serving man claimed he didn't know the reason for the plot, only that he had been ordered to follow Lord Valerius's instructions. He pleaded for mercy, begging Lord Marius to believe him. Lord Marius listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When the serving man had finished, he turned to the guards. "Take him back to his cell," he said, "and see that he is well cared for. We may need him again." The guards led the serving man away, leaving Lord Marius alone in the interrogation chamber. He stood for a moment, his face thoughtful, then turned and walked towards the door. Anya quickly retreated from the peephole, ducking back into the dark passage. She didn't want to be discovered. She waited until she heard the door to the interrogation chamber close, then carefully emerged from the passage. She knew she had to be cautious. Lord Marius was clearly involved in the plot, or at least aware of it. He had tortured the serving man to extract information, but he hadn't seemed surprised by the revelations about Lord Valerius. It was as if he had been expecting it. Anya wondered if Lord Marius was working with the Queen and Lord Valerius, or if he had his own agenda. Was he trying to expose the plot, or was he simply trying to consolidate his own power? She knew she had to be careful not to trust anyone. The castle was a viper's nest of intrigue and betrayal. She had to rely on her own instincts, to gather as much information as she could before taking any further action. As she made her way back to her chamber, she noticed a figure lurking in the shadows. It was the Queen's personal guard, the hulking man with the scarred face. He watched her silently, his eyes cold and menacing. Anya quickened her pace, her heart pounding. She knew she was being followed, watched. The Queen was clearly keeping tabs on her, waiting for her to make a mistake. She reached her chamber and locked the door behind her. She felt trapped, surrounded by enemies. She didn't know who to trust or where to turn, but she knew she couldn't give up. She had to find a way to expose the plot, to save the king from the Queen and her co-conspirators. She just needed to find a way to outsmart them, to turn their own game against them. She sat on her bed, her mind racing. She needed a plan, a strategy. She needed to find a way to prove the Queen's guilt, to expose Lord Valerius's treachery, and to uncover Lord Marius's true motives. She was just a maid, with no power and no influence. How could she possibly hope to succeed against such powerful enemies? Then an idea struck her. She remembered something the serving man had said during the interrogation. He had mentioned that Lord Valerius and the Queen had been exchanging coded messages. If she could decipher those messages, she might be able to uncover the details of their plot. She might be able to find the proof she needed. Chapter 6. Cracking the Code. Anya knew deciphering the coded messages wouldn't be easy. She had no experience with cryptography, no knowledge of secret languages or ciphers, but she was determined to try. The king's life and the stability of the kingdom depended on it. Her first task was to find the messages. She knew they were likely hidden somewhere in the Queen's private chambers, or perhaps in Lord Valerius's study. Both places were heavily guarded, practically impenetrable. She spent the next day observing the Queen's movements, studying the routines of the guards, searching for any weakness in their security. She noticed that the Queen often took a walk in the royal gardens in the late afternoon, accompanied by only a single guard. This gave Anya an idea. She knew that the gardens were sprawling and overgrown, with many secluded paths and hidden alcoves. If she could distract the guard, even for a few moments, she might be able to slip into the Queen's chambers unnoticed. It was a long shot, but it was the best plan she had. She waited until the appointed time, then made her way to the gardens. She saw the Queen strolling along a rose-lined path, the guard trailing a few paces behind. Anya took a deep breath and approached them, pretending to be engrossed in picking flowers. As she drew closer, she deliberately tripped, dropping her basket of flowers at the Queen's feet. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Your Majesty," she exclaimed, scrambling to gather the scattered petals. "I didn't see you there." The Queen frowned, her eyes cold and impatient. "Be more careful," she snapped. "You almost ruined my gown." The guard stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He clearly didn't trust Anya. "It was an accident, Your Majesty," Anya said, her voice trembling. "Please forgive me." While the Queen and the guard were distracted, Anya discreetly plucked a small, thorny rose from the bush next to her. As she straightened up, she accidentally brushed against the guard's arm, scratching him with the thorn. He winced in pain, his attention diverted to the scratch. "Damn it," he muttered, examining the small wound. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Anya said, feigning concern. "Let me get you a bandage. I know where the gardener keeps his supplies." The guard hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said, "but be quick about it." Anya hurried away, her heart pounding. She knew she had only a few minutes. She raced towards the castle, slipped through a side entrance, and made her way to the queen's chambers. She quickly picked the lock with a hairpin she had hidden in her sleeve, then slipped inside. The queen's chambers were opulent and luxurious, filled with expensive furniture, silk draperies, and priceless works of art. Anya ignored the riches and focused on her task. She searched frantically, rummaging through drawers, examining books, and peering behind tapestries. She finally found what she was looking for, hidden inside a hollowed-out book on the queen's bedside table. It was a small, leather-bound journal, filled with pages of carefully written script. Anya quickly scanned the pages. The script was indecipherable, a jumble of symbols, numbers, and letters that made no sense. This was it, the coded messages she had been searching for. She knew she couldn't stay any longer. The guard would be suspicious if she didn't return soon. She quickly tucked the journal into her apron and slipped out of the chambers, carefully relocking the door behind her. She returned to the gardens, pretending to be carrying a bandage. The guard was still examining his scratch, his expression annoyed. "Here," Anya said, handing him the bandage. "I'm so sorry for scratching you." The guard grunted, taking the bandage. He still looked suspicious, but he didn't say anything. Anya breathed a sigh of relief. She had gotten away with it. She had the coded messages. Now all she had to do was decipher them. Back in her chamber, Anya laid the journal on her bed and stared at it in despair. The coded script seemed impossible to crack. She had no idea where to even begin. She spent hours poring over the pages, searching for patterns, trying to make sense of the symbols. She tried different alphabets, different ciphers, but nothing worked. Just as she was about to give up, she noticed something. She realized that the coded script seemed to be based on the shapes of constellations. The symbols resembled stars, and the lines connecting them resembled the patterns of the constellations. Anya remembered that the queen was a keen astronomer, often spending hours studying the night sky. It made sense that she would use constellations as the basis for her code. Anya pulled out a star chart and began to compare it to the coded script. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to decipher the messages. She realized that each constellation represented a letter, and the position of the stars within the constellation determined the specific word. It was a slow and tedious process, but she was making progress. As she deciphered the messages, she began to uncover the details of the queen's plot. She learned that the queen and Lord Valerius were planning to overthrow the king and seize the throne. They had been secretly gathering support from disaffected nobles, promising them power and riches in exchange for their loyalty. She also learned that the belladonna was just the first step in their plan. They were planning to assassinate other key members of the royal court, to eliminate any opposition to their rule. Anya felt a surge of anger and determination. She had to stop them before they could carry out their evil plan. But she knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed help. Chapter 7. An unlikely ally. Anya knew that she couldn't trust anyone in the royal court. The queen had spies everywhere, and she didn't know who to turn to. Then she remembered the king's chamberlain, Lord Marius. He was a stern and enigmatic man, but he had seemed genuinely concerned about the king's safety. He had also shown a willingness to investigate the plot, even if it meant torturing the serving man. Anya decided to take a chance. She knew it was risky, but she had no other choice. She had to confide in someone, and Lord Marius seemed like the least dangerous option. She waited until late at night, when the castle was quiet and the guards were less vigilant. Then she slipped out of her chamber and made her way to Lord Marius's private quarters. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. He might be angry that she had come to him, or he might even betray her to the queen. The door opened, and Lord Marius stood before her, his face stern and unreadable. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice cold. Anya took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you," she said. "It's about the plot to poison the king." Lord Marius raised an eyebrow, his expression intrigued. "Come in," he said, stepping aside to let her enter. His quarters were sparsely furnished, reflecting his austere personality. There were no decorations, no personal touches. The only adornment was a large map of the kingdom hanging on the wall. Lord Marius gestured for her to sit, then took a seat opposite her. "All right," he said. "Tell me what you know." Anya hesitated for a moment, then began to tell him everything. She told him about overhearing the Queen's conversation, about finding the coded messages, and about deciphering them to uncover the details of the plot. Lord Marius listened intently, his expression unwavering. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. He simply listened, absorbing every word. When Anya had finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, his face thoughtful. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "If what you say is true, then the Queen and Lord Valerius are guilty of treason." "It is true," Anya insisted. "I have the coded messages to prove it." She reached into her apron and pulled out the journal, handing it to Lord Marius. He examined it carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "These are indeed coded," he said. "And you say you have deciphered them?" "I can show you the translations." She explained to him how she had cracked the code, using the constellations as a key. Lord Marius listened with growing interest, his skepticism gradually fading away. "Remarkable," he said finally. "You are a clever and resourceful woman, Anya." He paused for a moment, then looked at her intently. "But why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Why did you come to me?" Anya hesitated. "Because I trust you," she said. "I believe you want to protect the king." Lord Marius smiled, a wry, cynical smile. "Trust is a rare commodity in this court, Anya," he said, "but I appreciate your faith in me." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened castle grounds. "I have suspected for some time that the Queen was up to something," he said. "Your information confirms my suspicions." He turned back to Anya, his eyes narrowed. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Anya took a deep breath. "I want you to help me expose the plot," she said. "I want you to help me save the king." Lord Marius nodded slowly. "I will help you," he said, "but be warned. This is a dangerous game. The Queen and Lord Valerius are powerful enemies. We will have to be very careful." He paused for a moment, then added, "And you must understand, I have my own agenda. I will help you save the king, but I will also use this opportunity to advance my own position. Are you willing to accept that?" Anya hesitated. She didn't like the sound of Lord Marius's agenda, but she knew she had no other choice. She needed his help, even if it meant compromising her own principles. "I accept." Lord Marius nodded, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Good," he said. "Then let us begin." He began to outline his plan, his voice low and conspiratorial. Anya listened intently, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She was finally taking action, fighting back against the Queen and her co-conspirators. But she knew that the road ahead would be long and perilous. She had to be prepared for anything. Chapter 8. A Web of Deceit. Lord Marius's plan was intricate and risky, relying heavily on manipulation and misdirection. He intended to use the Queen's own web of deceit against her, turning her allies into unwitting pawns in their scheme. "The key," Lord Marius explained, pacing his quarters, "is to create doubt, to sow seeds of suspicion among the Queen's supporters. We need to make them question her leadership, her motives, and ultimately, her ability to seize the throne." He instructed Anya to spread carefully crafted rumors, whispers designed to undermine the Queen's credibility. Anya, with her position as a maid, was perfectly placed to disseminate these whispers throughout the castle. She knew the servants' gossip network intimately, and she could ensure that the rumors reached the right ears. Plant the idea that he is manipulating the Queen, using her for his own ambitions. Suggest that he is secretly planning to betray her, to claim the throne for himself once the king is gone. Anya hesitated. "But Lord Valerius is one of the Queen's most trusted advisors," she said. "Won't she see through our lies?" "She might," Lord Marius conceded, "but the seed of doubt will already be planted. The Queen is a proud and ambitious woman. She will not tolerate anyone challenging her authority. If she suspects that Lord Valerius is plotting against her, she will act swiftly and decisively." Their plan hinged on exploiting the Queen's paranoia and her ruthlessness. They hoped that by turning her against Lord Valerius, they could weaken her power base and disrupt her plans. Anya spent the next few days spreading the rumors, subtly dropping hints and whispers in the right places. She spoke to the cooks, the stable hands, the laundresses, anyone who would listen and pass on the gossip. She mentioned seeing Lord Valerius meeting secretly with foreign emissaries, hinting that he was seeking their support for his own claim to the throne. She suggested that he was embezzling funds from the royal treasury, building a war chest for his future ambitions. She even hinted that Lord Valerius was having an affair with another noblewoman, a woman known for her beauty and her influence. This rumor was particularly effective, playing on the queen's jealousy and their insecurities. As the rumor spread, Anya noticed a change in the atmosphere of the castle. The queen's supporters became more wary, more cautious. They began to watch Lord Valerius with suspicion, questioning his every move. The queen herself seemed increasingly agitated. She became more irritable, more demanding, and more secretive. She spent hours in private meetings with Lord Valerius, their voices hushed and urgent. Anya knew that their plan was working. The queen was beginning to doubt Lord Valerius's loyalty. The web of deceit was tightening around her. Meanwhile, Lord Marius was pursuing his own agenda. He was gathering evidence against the queen and Lord Valerius, meticulously documenting their crimes and their treasonous activities. He used his position as chamberlain to access secret documents, to intercept coded messages, and to monitor the queen's communications. He was building a case that would be airtight, a case that would convince the king of the queen's guilt. Lord Marius also began to cultivate relationships with other members of the royal court, men and women who had been overlooked and underappreciated by the queen. He offered them promises of power and influence, enticing them to join his cause. He was building his own power base, positioning himself to take control of the kingdom once the queen was removed from the picture. Anya watched his maneuvers with growing unease. She had agreed to help him save the king, but she didn't want to be complicit in his own power grab. She feared that he was simply using her, manipulating her, to achieve his own ends. She confronted him about her concerns, expressing her reservations about his methods. "I agreed to help you save the king," she said, "but I don't want to be a pawn in your game. I don't want to help you seize power." Lord Marius smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Don't worry, Anya," he said. "I have no intention of becoming king. I am simply ensuring that the kingdom is in capable hands once the queen is gone." He paused for a moment, then added, "Besides, I need you, Anya. You are my eyes and ears in the castle. You are the one who is spreading the rumors, undermining the queen's support. Without you, my plan would fall apart." Anya knew he was right. She was an essential part of his plan, but she still felt uneasy. She feared that she was being used, that her actions were having unintended consequences. She resolved to be more cautious, to be more aware of Lord Marius's motives, and to ensure that she didn't become a tool in his quest for power. Chapter 9: The Queen's Wrath. The atmosphere in the castle grew increasingly tense. The queen, consumed by paranoia and suspicion, lashed out at anyone who crossed her path. Her once charming facade crumbled, revealing a ruthless and vindictive nature. Anya witnessed several instances of the queen's wrath firsthand. She saw her publicly humiliate a loyal servant for a minor mistake, stripping him of his position and banishing him from the castle. She saw her order the imprisonment of a noblewoman who had dared to question her authority. The queen's behavior instilled fear and resentment among her supporters. They began to question their loyalty to her, wondering if she was truly fit to rule. The rumors that Anya had been spreading were having their intended effect. The queen's power base was crumbling. Lord Valerius, sensing the shift in the queen's attitude, grew increasingly anxious. He tried to reassure her of his loyalty, but she remained suspicious. Anya overheard one of their arguments, their voices rising in anger. "I have always been loyal to you, Isolde," Lord Valerius exclaimed. "I have risked everything for you. How can you doubt me now?" "Because I have heard the whispers," the queen retorted, her voice cold and accusing. "I have heard the rumors that you are plotting against me, that you are planning to claim the throne for yourself." "Those are lies," Lord Valerius insisted. "I would never betray you. I am your most trusted advisor, your most loyal friend." "Then prove it," the queen challenged. Prove that you are not plotting against me. Prove that you are worthy of my trust. Lord Valerius, desperate to regain the queen's favor, agreed to do whatever she asked. He promised to expose the traitors who were spreading the rumors, to prove his loyalty by any means necessary. The queen, satisfied for the moment, embraced Lord Valerius, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of relief and suspicion. Anya knew that Lord Valerius was walking into a trap. The queen was using him, manipulating him to eliminate her enemies. She warned Lord Marius about the queen's plan, but he remained unconcerned. Let her use him, he said. Let her expose her own treachery. It will only make our case stronger. Anya felt uneasy. She didn't like the idea of Lord Valerius being used as a pawn in their game. He was a complex and intelligent man, and she didn't want to see him destroyed. She had to trust Lord Marius's plan, even if she didn't agree with it. Lord Valerius, determined to prove his loyalty to the queen, began to investigate the rumors that were circulating throughout the castle. He interrogated servants, questioned guards, and scrutinized the movements of every member of the royal court. He quickly discovered that Anya was the source of the rumors. He confronted her, his eyes filled with anger and betrayal. "You," he exclaimed, "you are the one who has been spreading lies about me. You are the one who has turned the queen against me." Anya didn't deny the accusations. She knew she couldn't lie to him. "I am sorry, Lord Valerius," she said, "but I had no choice. I was acting on orders." "Whose orders?" Lord Valerius demanded. "Who told you to do this?" "She couldn't betray Lord Marius." "I cannot say," she replied, "but I assure you I had no personal malice towards you. I was simply following instructions." Lord Valerius's face darkened with rage. "You will pay for this," he said. "You will pay for turning the queen against me." He grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful. "I am going to tell the queen everything," he said. "She will punish you for your treachery." Anya knew she was in danger. If Lord Valerius revealed her role in the plot, the queen would not hesitate to execute her. She struggled to free herself from his grasp, but he was too strong. He dragged her towards the queen's chambers, determined to expose her. Anya knew she had to act quickly. She had to find a way to escape, to warn Lord Marius about what was happening. Just as they reached the queen's door, Anya saw an opportunity. A servant was carrying a tray of wine glasses, weaving his way through the corridor. Anya deliberately tripped, knocking the tray out of the servant's hands. The glasses shattered, sending shards of glass flying through the air. Lord Valerius, startled by the sudden noise, loosened his grip on Anya's arm. She seized the opportunity, wrenching herself free and fleeing down the corridor. Lord Valerius cursed, then turned to pursue her. Anya knew she had to get away, to find a safe place to hide. Her life depended on it. Chapter 10. Desperate Measures. Anya sprinted through the castle corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear Lord Valerius's heavy footsteps behind her, growing closer with each passing moment. She had to lose him, find somewhere he wouldn't think to look. She darted into the kitchens, the air thick with the aroma of roasting meat and simmering sauces. Cooks and scullery maids scurried about, oblivious to the chase unfolding around them. Anya weaved through the bustling scene, knocking over a stack of empty pots to create a momentary distraction. She burst out of the kitchens and into a narrow, dimly lit passage. This was a seldom-used service route, designed for transporting supplies and waste. It was dank and dirty, but it offered the best chance of evading her pursuer. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall, listening intently. The sound of Lord Valerius's footsteps echoed behind her, still gaining. She knew she couldn't outrun him. She needed to find a hiding place and fast. Ahead, she saw a small, arched doorway, leading to what appeared to be a storage cellar. It was dark and musty, but it was her only option. She slipped through the doorway and into the cellar, pulling the heavy wooden door shut behind her. She leaned against the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear Lord Valerius's footsteps approaching, then stopping just outside the cellar door. "I know you're in there, Anya," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Come out, and I promise I won't hurt you. Just tell me who put you up to this, and I'll let you go." She knew that if she surrendered, he would hand her over to the queen, and her fate would be sealed. She held her breath, praying that he would give up and move on. But Lord Valerius was persistent. She could hear him rattling the door handle, trying to force his way in. The door was old and weak, and Anya knew it wouldn't hold for long. She frantically searched the cellar for another way out, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The cellar was filled with dusty barrels and forgotten supplies. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. In the far corner she saw a small grated window, barely large enough to fit her head through. It was a long shot, but it was her only hope. She rushed to the window and tried to pry open the grate, but it was firmly secured. She searched for a tool, anything she could use to force it open. She spotted a rusty crowbar leaning against a barrel. She grabbed it and wedged it between the grate and the stone wall. She strained with all her might, her muscles burning with effort. Just as she felt the grate begin to loosen, the cellar door burst open. Lord Valerius stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "You can't escape me, Anya," he said, his voice a snarl. "You're going to pay for what you've done." Anya didn't hesitate. She swung the crowbar with all her force, striking Lord Valerius in the head. He staggered backward, momentarily stunned. Anya seized the opportunity. She wrenched the grate from the window and squeezed through the opening, ignoring the sharp edges that cut into her skin. She dropped to the ground outside the cellar, landing hard on the damp earth. She scrambled to her feet and ran, not looking back. She knew that Lord Valerius would be after her again, but she had bought herself some time. She had to find Lord Marius, warn him about what had happened, and come up with a new plan. She made her way to Lord Marius's quarters, but she found the door guarded by two unfamiliar soldiers. They eyed her with suspicion, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords. "What do you want?" one of the soldiers demanded. "I need to see Lord Marius," Anya replied, trying to sound calm. "It's urgent." "Lord Marius is unavailable," the soldier said. "He is under strict orders not to be disturbed." Anya's heart sank. She knew something was wrong. Lord Marius had been betrayed, or captured. The Queen had outmaneuvered them. She tried to reason with the soldiers, but they refused to budge. She realized that she was on her own. She had to find a way to save Lord Marius, and to expose the Queen's plot before it was too late. She retreated from Lord Marius's quarters, her mind racing. She had to think, to come up with a plan, but she was running out of time. She decided to seek refuge in the castle's library, a vast and labyrinthine space filled with ancient texts and forgotten secrets. She knew the library well, having spent many hours there as a child, seeking solace in its quiet corners. She hoped that she could find some clue, some piece of information that would help her unravel the Queen's scheme and rescue Lord Marius. She slipped into the library, the heavy oak doors closing silently behind her. The air was cool and still, filled with the scent of aged parchment and binding glue. She wandered through the towering shelves, her eyes scanning the titles, searching for something that might be relevant. She felt lost and alone, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of centuries, yet unable to find the answer she desperately needed. She stumbled upon a hidden alcove, a small, secluded space filled with forgotten tomes and discarded scrolls. She began to rummage through the dusty pile, hoping to find something of interest. She came across a small leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. The title was written in faded ink, barely legible. "The Serpent's Kiss," it read. Intrigued, Anya opened the book and began to read. It was a collection of ancient legends and myths, tales of treachery, betrayal, and poison. As she read, she felt a growing sense of dread. The stories seemed to mirror the events unfolding around her, as if the book held a key to understanding the Queen's plot. She turned to a chapter titled "The Queen of Serpents," a story about a beautiful and ambitious woman who poisoned her husband, the king, and seized the throne for herself. The story was filled with details about poisons, secret passages, and hidden alliances. As she read, Anya realized that the story was not just a myth, it was a warning, a prophecy. The Queen was following in the footsteps of the Queen of Serpents, repeating the same acts of treachery and betrayal. Anya knew what she had to do. She had to find the Queen's poison, the source of her power. She had to destroy it, and break the cycle of treachery. She closed the book, her heart filled with determination. She was no longer just a maid, a pawn in a game of power. She was a warrior, a protector of the innocent. She would fight the queen, and she would win. She left the library, her steps filled with purpose. She knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay in her path. The fate of the kingdom rested on her shoulders. Chapter 11. The Serpent's Lair. Anya's quest to find the queen's poison led her back to the queen's private chambers. It wasn't a literal poison she was seeking, not necessarily. It was the source of her power, the key to her control. Anya believed it was something hidden within those chambers, something that fueled her ambition and justified her treachery. Gaining access was a daunting task. The queen's chambers were now heavily guarded, the soldiers under strict orders to allow no one inside without express permission. Anya knew she couldn't simply walk in. She needed a disguise, a way to blend in. She remembered the distraught servant whose wine glasses she had broken. He had been summarily dismissed, his uniform discarded. If she could find that uniform, Anya made her way to the servants' quarters, a cramped and dimly lit section of the castle. She located the room where the dismissed servant had lived, and finding the door unlocked, slipped inside. The room was sparsely furnished, containing only a narrow bed, a small table, and a battered chest. She rummaged through the chest, her fingers searching for the discarded uniform. She found it at the bottom, crumpled and stained with wine. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. She quickly changed into the uniform, hoping it would be enough to fool the guards. She smoothed the wrinkles as best she could, and tried to adopt the humble demeanor of a servant. She approached the queen's chambers, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath and walked confidently towards the guards. "I have been ordered to deliver fresh linens to Her Majesty's chambers," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The guards eyed her suspiciously, their eyes lingering on her face. Anya held her breath, praying they wouldn't recognize her. "Let me see your hands," one of the guards said, his voice gruff. Anya hesitated, then extended her hands, palms up. The guards examined them carefully, looking for signs of rough labor. Anya had been careful to keep her hands soft, using creams and lotions to disguise her true occupation. "All right," the guard said finally, his expression still suspicious. "But don't linger. Her Majesty is not to be disturbed." Anya nodded and slipped past the guards, her heart pounding with relief. She was inside. The queen's chambers were even more opulent than she remembered. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and incense, and the walls were adorned with tapestries and paintings. Anya knew she had to be quick. She didn't know how long she could stay before the guards became suspicious. She began to search the room, her eyes scanning every corner, every drawer, every shelf. She examined the queen's personal belongings, her jewelry, her clothing, her books. She found nothing that seemed particularly significant, nothing that could be considered the source of her power. She began to feel discouraged. Perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps the queen's power came from something else entirely. Just as she was about to give up, she noticed a small locked chest tucked away in a dark corner of the room. It was made of dark wood, inlaid with silver, and adorned with a serpent's head clasp. Anya's heart skipped a beat. It was the same symbol that had appeared in the book she had found in the library. She had a feeling that this chest held the key to the queen's power. She tried to open the chest, but the lock was sturdy. She searched for a key, but she couldn't find one. She remembered that she had learned how to pick locks from a former stable boy. She pulled a hairpin from her hair and began to work on the lock. It took several minutes, but finally, she heard a faint click. The lock sprang open, and Anya lifted the lid of the chest. Inside, she found a collection of strange and unsettling objects. There were vials filled with dark liquids, pouches filled with dried herbs, and a small, intricately carved wooden doll. Anya recognized some of the objects. They were ingredients for poisons and potions, items that the queen likely used to manipulate and control those around her. But there was one object that stood out from the rest. It was a small silver mirror, its surface clouded and distorted. Anya picked it up and examined it closely. As she gazed into the mirror, she saw a fleeting image, a glimpse of something dark and sinister. She realized that the mirror was enchanted, imbued with a dark magic. It was a tool for manipulation, a way for the queen to see into the hearts and minds of others. It was the source of her power, the key to her control. Anya knew she had to destroy the mirror. It was too dangerous to leave in the queen's hands. She raised the mirror above her head and smashed it against the floor. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, scattering shards of glass across the room. As the mirror broke, Anya felt a surge of energy, a release of dark magic. The air seemed to shimmer and crackle, and the room filled with an eerie glow. Anya felt a sense of relief, a feeling that she had broken the queen's spell. But she also knew that she had made a powerful enemy. The queen would not forgive her for destroying her mirror. Just then, the door to the queen's chambers burst open, and the queen herself stood in the doorway, her face contorted with rage. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her eyes blazing with fury. "You will pay for this." Chapter 12. The Gathering Storm. The queen's fury was a tangible thing, a wave of malice that washed over Anya. Isolde's face, usually composed and regal, was now a mask of unadulterated rage. "You dare to trespass in my chambers, to destroy my possessions?" she hissed, advancing towards Anya. "You will suffer for this, Maid. I will make you regret the day you were born." Anya stood her ground. Despite the fear that threatened to consume her, she knew she had to be brave, to stand up to the queen's tyranny. "You have betrayed your kingdom, Isolde," Anya said, her voice trembling slightly. "You have plotted to murder the king, to seize the throne for yourself. I will not let you succeed." The queen laughed, a cold, mocking sound that sent a shiver down Anya's spine. "You think you can stop me, a mere maid?" she said. "You are nothing, insignificant. I have powerful allies, loyal supporters. You cannot hope to defeat me." "Your allies are beginning to doubt you," Anya retorted. "They have seen your true nature, your ruthlessness, your ambition. They know that you are not fit to rule." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Lies," she exclaimed. "They are loyal to me. They will follow me to the end." "They will follow you to their deaths," Anya replied. "They will be used and discarded, just as you have used and discarded so many others." The queen raised her hand, signaling to the guards who had rushed into the room behind her. "Seize her," she commanded. "Take her to the dungeons. I will deal with her later." The guards advanced towards Anya, their swords drawn. Anya knew she couldn't fight them. She was outnumbered, outmatched. She looked around the room, searching for a way out. She saw a small window, high above the floor. It was a long shot, but it was her only option. She made a sudden dash towards the window, dodging the guards' outstretched hands. She grabbed a heavy tapestry and used it to climb up the wall, reaching the window just as the guards closed in on her. She smashed the window with her fist, shattering the glass and sending shards flying. She climbed through the opening, ignoring the cuts and scratches. She found herself on a narrow ledge, high above the castle grounds. The wind howled around her, threatening to knock her off balance. Below, she saw the guards peering out the window, their faces filled with frustration. She knew they would soon find a way to reach her, but she had bought herself some time. She began to edge her way along the ledge, hoping to find a way down. She knew that if she fell, she would surely die. But she was determined to escape the queen's clutches, to continue her fight for the kingdom. As she made her way along the ledge, she noticed a rope hanging from a nearby tower. It was a long shot, but it offered the only chance of escape. She carefully made her way towards the rope, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out and grabbed the rope, testing its strength. It seemed secure. She took a deep breath and swung herself off the ledge, grabbing the rope with both hands. She began to slide down the rope, her hands burning with friction. The rope was too long, and she ran out of slack before reaching the ground. She was still several feet above the earth, dangling precariously from the rope. She knew she had to let go. She closed her eyes and released her grip, plummeting to the ground below. She landed hard, her body slamming against the earth. She felt a sharp pain in her ankle, and she knew she had broken it. Despite the pain, she struggled to her feet and began to run, limping away from the castle. She knew the guards would be after her, and she had to get away as quickly as possible. She stumbled through the darkness, her ankle throbbing with pain. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she had to keep moving. She had to find a way to warn the people of the queen's treachery, to rally them against her tyranny. She reached a small village, nestled in the foothills of the mountains. She collapsed in the village square, exhausted and injured. A group of villagers gathered around her, their faces filled with concern. They recognized her as a maid from the castle, and they knew that something was wrong. Anya told them her story. Chapter 13, Whispers of Rebellion. Anya, despite her pain and exhaustion, poured out her story to the villagers gathered around her in the small, quiet square. The queen's treachery, the poisoning plot, the shattered mirror, she spared no detail. She knew it sounded like a fever dream, a mad woman's tale, but she pleaded with them to believe her. She described King Theron's kindness and the queen's increasing cruelty, hoping to stir their loyalty. The villagers listened, their faces a mixture of skepticism and concern. They were simple folk, accustomed to a quiet life, far removed from the intrigues of the royal court. The idea that their queen, the beautiful and regal Isolde, was plotting to kill the king and seize the throne seemed unbelievable. Still, Anya's desperation was palpable. Her injuries were real, and her story, however fantastical, rang with a certain truth. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Their trust in the monarchy, already strained by recent taxes and perceived neglect, wavering. An old woman, her face etched with wrinkles and wisdom, stepped forward. "We have heard whispers," she said, her voice raspy with age. "Whispers of unrest in the castle, whispers of the queen's displeasure. We dismiss them as rumors, but your words give them weight." Others murmured in agreement. The village blacksmith, a burly man with calloused hands, spoke next. "King Theron has always been a fair ruler. He has never forgotten us, even in times of plenty. If the queen threatens him—" He trailed off, clenching his fist. Anya felt a flicker of hope. These villagers, though humble, possessed a deep-seated sense of justice and loyalty. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could rally them to the king's cause. "I need your help," Anya said, her voice hoarse but firm. "I need you to spread the word, to tell everyone what the queen is planning. We need to warn the king, to gather support to stop her before it's too late." The villagers hesitated. They were farmers and artisans, not soldiers or revolutionaries. The thought of rebelling against the queen, of defying the royal authority, was terrifying. But Anya's passion was infectious. She spoke of the king's kindness, of the queen's treachery, of the threat to their way of life. She painted a picture of a kingdom plunged into chaos and tyranny under the queen's rule. Slowly, one by one, the villagers began to nod in agreement. They would spread the word, warn their neighbors, and prepare to defend their king. The old woman offered Anya shelter in her small cottage, tending to her broken ankle with herbal remedies and soothing words. The blacksmith fashioned a makeshift crutch, allowing Anya to move with greater ease. Over the next few days, the villagers worked tirelessly, spreading the news of the queen's plot throughout the surrounding countryside. They spoke in hushed tones in taverns and marketplaces, sharing Anya's story with anyone who would listen. At first, many dismissed the rumors as nonsense, the ravings of a runaway maid. But as the whispers spread, more and more people began to believe. They remembered the queen's cold demeanor, her increasing demands, her disregard for the common folk. They saw Anya's injuries as proof of her story, a testament to her bravery and her unwavering loyalty to the king. They began to question the queen's authority, to wonder if she was truly fit to rule. The whispers of rebellion grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the countryside. Farmers sharpened their pitchforks, blacksmiths forged swords, and villagers prepared to defend their homes. News of the growing unrest reached the queen's ears. She dismissed it at first as the work of troublemakers and malcontents. But as the reports grew more frequent and more alarming, she began to realize the gravity of the situation. She ordered her guards to suppress the rebellion, to arrest the instigators, and to silence the rumors. but the guards were outnumbered and outmatched. The villagers, fueled by righteous anger and a fierce loyalty to their king, fought back with surprising ferocity. The countryside erupted in chaos, as small pockets of rebellion sprang up throughout the kingdom. The queen's authority began to crumble, her grip on power slipping with each passing day. Anya, despite her injury, became a symbol of the rebellion, a rallying point for those who opposed the queen's tyranny. She traveled from village to village, spreading her message of hope and defiance, inspiring others to join the fight. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. The queen was a powerful and ruthless enemy, and she had the support of many wealthy and influential nobles. But Anya was determined to fight to the end, to save her king and to restore peace and justice to her kingdom. Chapter 14: The King's Dilemma. News of the widespread rebellion and the accusations against Queen Isolde finally reached King Theron. He was stunned, disbelieving of the charges leveled against his wife. He had loved Isolde deeply, trusting her counsel and believing in her unwavering loyalty. The thought that she would plot against him, attempt to seize his throne, was incomprehensible. Yet the evidence was mounting. Reports from loyal messengers spoke of Anya's bravery, the villagers' unwavering conviction, and the growing unrest across the kingdom. Even some of his trusted advisors, hesitant to voice their concerns openly, hinted at the queen's increasingly erratic behavior. The king was torn. He desperately wanted to believe in Isolde's innocence, but he couldn't ignore the overwhelming evidence. He knew he had to investigate, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. He summoned his most trusted advisors, men and women who had served him faithfully for many years. He laid out the situation before them, explaining the accusations against the queen and the growing rebellion in the countryside. "I need your counsel," he said, his voice heavy with anguish. "I need you to help me uncover the truth. Is Isolde truly guilty of these crimes, or is she the victim of a cruel conspiracy?" The advisors exchanged uneasy glances. They knew that the king's decision would have far-reaching consequences, potentially plunging the kingdom into civil war. Lord Baelor, the king's oldest and most trusted advisor, spoke first. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice grave, "the accusations against the queen are serious. We cannot dismiss them lightly. We must investigate thoroughly to uncover the truth, whatever it may be." Lady Lyra, a shrewd and intelligent woman who had served as the king's diplomat for many years, spoke next. "Your Majesty," she said, "we must be cautious. The queen has many powerful allies. If we accuse her falsely, we risk alienating those allies and dividing the kingdom." Other advisors offered their opinions, some defending the queen, others expressing their doubts. The king listened patiently, weighing their words carefully. Finally, he made his decision. "We will launch a full and impartial investigation," he said, his voice firm. "We will question witnesses, examine evidence, and uncover the truth, no matter where it may lead." He appointed a special commission to conduct the investigation, tasking them with uncovering the truth about the queen's alleged crimes. He instructed them to be thorough, impartial, and fearless. He also sent messengers to Anya and the rebellious villagers, promising them a fair hearing and guaranteeing their safety. He wanted to hear their story firsthand, to understand their motivations, and to assess the truth of their accusations. The king knew he was walking a dangerous tightrope. He had to balance his love for his wife with his duty to his kingdom. He had to uncover the truth without provoking a civil war. He had to find a way to restore peace and order to his troubled land. He spent his days in meetings and consultations, poring over documents and questioning witnesses. He struggled to reconcile the image of the loving and loyal wife he had known with the ruthless and ambitious plotter described by Anya and the villagers. Sleep offered little respite, his dreams haunted by visions of betrayal and bloodshed. He tossed and turned, unable to find peace. As the investigation progressed, the evidence against the queen began to mount. Witnesses testified to her secret meetings with Lord Valerius, her increasing paranoia, and her harsh treatment of those who questioned her authority. Documents were uncovered, detailing the queen's plans to overthrow the king and seize the throne. Coded messages were deciphered, revealing her secret alliances with disaffected nobles and foreign powers. The king's heart sank with each new revelation. He could no longer deny the truth. Isolde. Chapter 15. Confrontation in the throne room. The king, his heart heavy with sorrow and betrayal, summoned Queen Isolde to the throne room. He had hoped against hope that the accusations were false, that the evidence would somehow point to a misunderstanding. But the special commission's findings were irrefutable. Isolde, the woman he loved, the queen he trusted, was indeed guilty of treason. The throne room, usually a symbol of royal power and authority, felt cold and oppressive. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, doing little to warm the atmosphere. The king sat on his throne, his face etched with grief. He awaited Isolde's arrival, steeling himself for the confrontation that lay ahead. When Isolde entered, she moved with her usual regal grace. She was dressed in a magnificent gown of emerald green silk, her dark hair perfectly coiffed, her face carefully composed. She curtsied before the king, her eyes betraying no sign of guilt or remorse. "You summoned me, Theron?" she asked, her voice cool and controlled. The king rose from his throne, his expression a mixture of sorrow and anger. "Isolde," he said, his voice low and trembling, "I have received the findings of the special commission. They have uncovered disturbing truths." Isolde raised an eyebrow, her expression one of feigned innocence. "What truths are those, Theron?" she asked. "They have uncovered your plot to overthrow me," the king said, his voice rising. "They have uncovered your secret alliances with disaffected nobles and foreign powers. They have uncovered your plans to seize the throne for yourself." Isolde's composure finally cracked. Her face flushed with anger, and her eyes flashed with fury. "Those are lies," she exclaimed. "Fabrications. I have been framed. I would never betray you, Theron." "The evidence is overwhelming, Isolde," the king said, his voice firm. "Witnesses have testified against you. Documents have been uncovered, detailing your plans. Coded messages have been deciphered, revealing your treachery." "Those witnesses have been bribed," she said. "Those documents have been forged. Those messages have been misinterpreted. I am innocent, Theron. I swear it." The king sighed, his heart breaking. He wanted to believe her, desperately, but he couldn't ignore the truth. "Isolde," he said, his voice pleading, "please tell me the truth. Tell me why you did this." Isolde hesitated for a moment, then her expression hardened. "I did it for the kingdom," she said, her voice cold. "You are a weak ruler, Theron. You are too kind, too trusting. You allow the nobles to exploit the people. You fail to protect our borders. The kingdom needs a strong ruler, someone who is willing to make the tough decisions." "And you believe you are that ruler?" the king asked, his voice incredulous. "I do," Isolde replied. "I am more intelligent, more ambitious, more ruthless than you. I would have made the kingdom great again, Theron. You would have only led it to ruin." The king stared at Isolde, his heart filled with a mixture of sadness and disgust. He had loved this woman, trusted her, believed in her. Now he saw her for what she truly was, a power-hungry, manipulative, and treacherous queen. "You have betrayed me, Isolde," the king said, his voice filled with sorrow. "You have betrayed the kingdom. You have betrayed yourself." He turned to the guards who stood at attention on either side of the throne. "Seize her," he commanded. "Take her to the dungeons. She will be tried for treason." The guards stepped forward, their hands reaching for Isolde. She struggled against them, her eyes blazing with anger. "You will regret this, Theron," she shrieked. "You will regret trusting those who have turned you against me." The guards dragged Isolde away, her cries echoing through the throne room. The king watched her go, his heart breaking with each passing moment. He knew that he had done what was right, what was necessary for the good of the kingdom. But it didn't make it any easier. He had lost the woman he loved, and the kingdom was teetering on the brink of civil war. He sank back onto his throne, his head in his hands. He felt utterly alone, burdened by the weight of his crown and the responsibility for his kingdom. He knew that he had to act quickly, to quell the rebellion and to restore order to the land. He had to show the people that he was still in control, that he was still their king. He summoned his advisors and began to plan his next move. He would send a message to the rebellious villages, promising them justice and fairness. He would offer amnesty to those who had been misled by the queen. He would demonstrate his strength and his resolve to protect his kingdom. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was determined to persevere. He would not let the queen's treachery destroy his kingdom. He would fight for his people, for his crown, and for his honor. Chapter 16: The Rebel Camp. King Theron, despite his grief and betrayal, understood that he couldn't remain cloistered in the castle. He needed to connect with his people, to show them he was still their king and that he understood their grievances. He made the bold decision to visit the rebel camp, risking his safety to speak directly with those who had risen against his rule. The journey was fraught with peril. The countryside was still teeming with unrest, and loyalist forces were struggling to maintain control. The king, accompanied by a small contingent of guards and his trusted advisor, Lord Baelor, traveled in disguise, hoping to avoid detection. After several days of arduous travel, they arrived at the rebel camp, a sprawling collection of tents and makeshift shelters nestled in a wooded valley. The camp was filled with farmers, artisans, and common folk, armed with pitchforks, axes, and whatever weapons they could find. The rebels were wary of the approaching party, their suspicion evident in their hardened faces and wary eyes. Annie, still recuperating from her injuries, was among the first to recognize the king. She rushed forward, her face filled with surprise and relief. "Your Majesty," she exclaimed, "I never expected to see you here." The king smiled warmly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Anya," he said, "you have shown great courage and loyalty. I have come to hear your story, to understand your grievances, and to find a way to restore peace to our kingdom." Anya led the king to the center of the camp, where he was greeted by the rebel leaders, a group of determined men and women who had risen to prominence in the uprising. They eyed the king with suspicion, unsure of his motives. The king spoke to them with sincerity and humility, acknowledging their grievances and promising to address their concerns. He explained the findings of the special commission, detailing the queen's treachery and his decision to bring her to justice. Chapter 17: A King's Promise. The rebel leaders, initially wary, slowly began to trust King Theron. They voiced their grievances, detailing the heavy taxes, the corrupt officials, and the perceived neglect from the royal court. They spoke of their fear of the queen's tyranny and their determination to protect their families and their way of life. The king listened intently, acknowledging their pain and frustration. He promised to address their concerns, to reform the government, and to ensure that their voices were heard. He vowed to be a just and compassionate ruler, a king who served his people, not the other way around. "I understand your anger," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "I understand your fear, but I assure you, I am not your enemy. I am your king, and I am here to serve you." He proposed a truce, offering amnesty to those who laid down their arms and pledged their loyalty to him. He promised to investigate the corrupt officials, to reduce the taxes, and to implement reforms that would benefit all citizens of the kingdom. The rebel leaders were skeptical. They had been betrayed by the monarchy before, and they were hesitant to trust the king's promises. "How can we be sure you will keep your word, your majesty?" one of the leaders asked, his voice filled with doubt. "How can we be sure you will not punish us for our rebellion?" "I give you my word as king," Theron replied, his voice firm. "I swear to you that I will honor my promises. I will not punish you for your rebellion. I will welcome you back into the fold, as loyal citizens of the kingdom." He offered to meet with them regularly, to discuss their concerns, and to ensure that his reforms were implemented effectively. He pledged to be transparent and accountable, to govern with fairness and justice. Anya, who had been listening intently, stepped forward, her face filled with hope. "I believe him," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I have seen the king's kindness, his compassion, his unwavering commitment to his people. I believe he will keep his word." Her words swayed the rebel leaders. They trusted Anya, recognizing her as a true friend and ally. They saw in her eyes the same hope and determination that burned in their own hearts. After much deliberation, the rebel leaders agreed to the truce. They laid down their arms, pledging their loyalty to King Theron and promising to work with him to build a better kingdom. The king's visit to the rebel camp was a turning point in the conflict. It demonstrated his courage, his compassion, and his commitment to his people. It showed that he was willing to listen, to learn, and to make amends for the mistakes of the past. News of the king's truce spread quickly throughout the kingdom. Many of the smaller rebel groups followed suit, laying down their arms and pledging their loyalty to the king. The rebellion began to lose momentum as the people began to believe in the king's promise of a better future. However, not all of the rebels were willing to accept the king's offer. Some of the more radical leaders, fueled by hatred and ambition, they continued to fight, hoping to overthrow the king and seize power for themselves. The king knew that he had to deal with these remaining rebels, to crush their rebellion and to restore order to the kingdom. He gathered his loyal forces and prepared for a final showdown. Chapter 18. The Final Stand. King Theron, having secured the allegiance of many of the rebel factions, now turned his attention to the remaining insurgents, those who refused to lay down their arms and embrace his offer of peace and reform. These rebels, led by a charismatic but ruthless warlord named Kale, posed a significant threat to the stability of the kingdom. Kale and his followers, fueled by a desire for power and a deep-seated distrust of the monarchy, had fortified themselves in an ancient fortress, perched atop a jagged mountain peak. The fortress was virtually impregnable, defended by steep cliffs, thick walls, and a well-trained army. King Theron knew that he couldn't afford to underestimate Kale. He needed to strike decisively, to crush the rebellion before it could spread any further. He gathered his loyal forces, bolstered by the former rebels who had joined his cause, and prepared for a siege. Anya, despite her injury, insisted on accompanying the king. She had become a trusted advisor, offering valuable insights into the rebels' motivations and strategies. She was determined to see the conflict through to the end, to ensure that peace and justice were restored to the kingdom. The siege of Kale's fortress lasted for several weeks. The king's forces bombarded the fortress with catapults and siege engines, but the thick walls held firm. The rebels retaliated with arrows and boiling oil, inflicting heavy casualties on the king's army. Anya, using her knowledge of the terrain, discovered a hidden passage that led into the fortress. She presented her plan to the king, proposing a small team infiltrate the fortress and open the gates from within. The king, hesitant to risk Anya's life, initially refused, but Anya insisted, arguing that her knowledge of the fortress was crucial to the success of the mission. Finally, the king relented, entrusting Anya with the dangerous task. She assembled a small team of skilled warriors, including some of the former rebels, who had pledged their loyalty to the king. Under the cover of darkness, Anya and her team slipped through the hidden passage, making their way into the heart of the fortress. They moved silently and stealthily, avoiding the patrols and guards. They reached the main gate, where they engaged in a fierce battle with the guards. Anya, despite her injury, fought with bravery and skill, inspiring her team to victory. They managed to overpower the guards and open the gates, allowing the king's forces to storm the fortress. A fierce battle ensued, as the king's army clashed with Kale's rebels. The battle raged for hours, the sound of clashing steel and war cries echoing through the mountains. The king's forces, fueled by their determination to end the conflict and restore peace to the kingdom, fought with unwavering courage. Finally, the tide began to turn. Kale's rebels, outnumbered and outmatched, began to waver. Kale himself, realizing that defeat was inevitable, attempted to flee, but was captured by Anya. With Kale captured and his forces defeated, the remaining rebels surrendered. The siege of the fortress was over. King Theron, victorious but weary, entered the fortress, his heart filled with relief and gratitude. He found Anya tending to the wounded, her face stained with blood and grime. He embraced her warmly, his eyes filled with admiration. "You have saved the kingdom, Anya," he said. his voice choked with emotion. "You are a true hero." Chapter 19. Justice and Reconciliation. With the rebellion finally quelled, King Theron focused on restoring peace and justice to the kingdom. He began by punishing those responsible for the uprising, while also offering amnesty to those who had been misled. Chaol, the rebel leader, was brought before the king to face judgment. Standing before Theron, Chaol remained defiant, unrepentant for his actions. He justified his rebellion by claiming that the king was weak and ineffective, that he had failed to protect his people from the queen's treachery and the nobles' corruption. King Theron listened patiently, acknowledging Chaol's grievances. He understood that Chaol's rebellion stemmed from a genuine desire to improve the lives of his people, even if his methods were misguided. Instead of executing him, the king offered Chaol a choice: exile, or to serve the kingdom in a constructive manner. Chaol, surprised by the king's mercy, chose exile, vowing to learn from his mistakes and to find a new purpose in life. The king then turned his attention to Queen Isolde. Her trial was a spectacle, drawing crowds from across the kingdom, eager to witness the fate of the woman who had betrayed their trust. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was found guilty of treason. However, King Theron, despite his personal pain, refused to let his emotions cloud his judgment. He commuted her sentence from death to life imprisonment, ensuring that she would be confined to a remote monastery, where she could contemplate her actions and atone for her sins. This act of mercy, while controversial, reinforced Theron's reputation for justice and compassion. With the legal proceedings concluded, the king embarked on a tour of the kingdom, visiting the villages and towns that had been affected by the rebellion. He listened to the concerns of his people, promising to address their grievances and to implement reforms that would benefit all citizens of the kingdom. He reduced taxes, appointed honest and capable officials, and established a council of advisors, composed of representatives from all social classes, to ensure that the voices of the common people were heard in the royal court. Anya, by the king's side, became a symbol of hope and inspiration. She was hailed as a hero, a champion of the common folk, and a testament to the power of courage and loyalty. The king appointed her as his personal advisor, entrusting her with the responsibility of overseeing the implementation of the reforms and ensuring that the kingdom never again succumbed to treachery and injustice. Chapter 20. A Kingdom Reborn. Years passed, and under King Theron's wise and compassionate rule, the kingdom flourished. The wounds of the rebellion slowly healed, and the people began to trust their king again. The reforms he had implemented brought prosperity and stability to the land, and the kingdom became a beacon of justice and fairness. The council of advisors, comprised of nobles, merchants, farmers, and artisans, proved to be an invaluable asset. They provided the king with diverse perspectives and ensured that his policies were equitable and effective. Anya, as the king's personal advisor, played a pivotal role in shaping the kingdom's future. She was a tireless advocate for the poor and oppressed, ensuring that their voices were heard and their needs were met. She traveled throughout the kingdom, inspecting the progress of the reforms and addressing any grievances that arose. She also established schools and hospitals, promoting education and health care for all citizens, regardless of their social status. She encouraged innovation and creativity, fostering a culture of entrepreneurship and economic growth. King Theron, with Anya by his side, ruled with wisdom and compassion, earning the love and respect of his people. He never forgot the lessons he had learned from the rebellion, and he was determined to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. Queen Isolde, confined to her remote monastery, spent her days in contemplation and prayer. Over time, she came to regret her actions, realizing the folly of her ambition and the pain she had caused. She eventually found solace in her faith, dedicating her life to serving others and atoning for her sins. The kingdom, once divided by treachery and rebellion, was now united by a shared sense of purpose and a deep-seated commitment to justice and equality. The people were proud of their king, their government, and their kingdom. Anya, the simple maid who had risked everything to save her king, became a legend, a symbol of courage, loyalty, and the transformative power of hope. Her story was told and retold, inspiring generations of citizens to strive for a better world. King Theron, on his deathbed, surrounded by his loved ones, looked back on his life with a sense of peace and satisfaction. He had faced many challenges, endured great sorrow, and made difficult decisions, but he had ultimately succeeded in restoring peace and justice to his kingdom, leaving behind a legacy of compassion and wisdom. As he closed his eyes for the final time, he whispered Anya's name, a silent testament to the extraordinary bond between a king and a maid, a bond that had saved a kingdom and changed the course of history. The kingdom, reborn from the ashes of treachery, continued to flourish, guided by the principles of justice, compassion, and the enduring spirit of its people.